All right. Hello, everyone. Let's see. Okay, we should be set. So today's class is the Advanced Matrix and Realist class. I did want to let you guys know just a couple basics about the webinar system itself before we get started with the class. I'll also give everybody a little bit of a chance to get in before we actually start uh, denying credit. All of you guys should be fine. But the webinars are set up in such a way that you guys will not have access to talking during the course. We don't require your video, but if you guys would like to ask a question with your voice, you can hit that raise hand button at the bottom. We do have a Q&A button instead. This is the preferable option. Since today's class is a little bit packed, the Advanced Matrix and Realist class, it's genuinely advanced, so we're going to try and go through some of the things that we think are important that everybody could use, or at least benefit from knowing that it's there, even if you don't use it often. So we try to keep things moving pretty quickly, but if you wouldn't mind posting your questions in Q&A, but if it is something complicated or nuanced, or you just have trouble articulating it, you can always use that raise hand option. I'll unmute you and we can get you the answer you need. And we also have a section down at the bottom for chat. This is going to be best used for comments, examples, any anecdotes that you guys would like to share about situations in which something we're using might have been helpful, or maybe some just caveats to how you guys use things, whatever the case may be, post those into chat. Also, the Q&A section is a little bit more obvious about when I receive a notification that's a question. This way we can actually leave the question open until maybe there's some more opportune time to answer it, or if you have a question that you've asked and somebody else was thinking about the same thing, they can see that you've already asked the question so that they don't have to type the same thing out twice. But we also will be getting the session recorded. I'll be sending you guys a link to the recording after class is over. I've got the recording from class earlier today that I'm going to be sending out soon too, in case you guys were in that class as well. But if you do end up having any issues whatsoever with the Zoom setup, whether you guys are getting disconnected or if there's problems with the audio or video, let us know immediately. Since this is a CE credit class, we try to make sure that we're accommodating as many people as possible. If there's some kind of technical issue that you're experiencing that's preventing you from getting credit, we want to know about that as quickly as possible so that we don't have a situation where you thought that you were going to get what you needed to get your license renewed, and then lo and behold, you had skipped out on 10 minutes of class, or whatever the case may be. But beyond that, I'm going to be sending the attendance record from this class out to our education director. Just as a fair warning, it might not be applied to your license particularly fast. We have had an unfortunately large number of people that did not complete their code of ethics and were subsequently suspended, and that's causing a cascading effect where we have a whole bunch of people trying to take care of a whole bunch of need that could have been dealt with in the last 3 years. But if you guys do end up noticing any delays in the CE from any of the webinars or classes that we're teaching on the MLS side of things, taking a little bit extra time, don't worry, we'll have everything turned in before the end of the month, and you should see that on your license. So easy peasy. Got a little bit of time left. I'm going to run through some of the buttons that you guys have access to. So during the course, again, you have the chat and Q&A button down at the bottom. Those are where you could type. You can also hit the raise hand option if you want to ask a question with your voice. And then we also have, for those of you guys who are joining us on a mobile device, we've got the screenshots from that. It's a little bit different layout. You have to tap the screen in order for the buttons to appear, but beyond that, everything else is pretty much the same. Raise hand if you guys have a question to ask, especially important if you guys are on a mobile device, because typing on those things is sometimes not ideal. But that's about it. If you do end up having any problems or get disconnected or anything like that after class, you have questions, give us a call over at the service desk. Our phone number is on the screen. There's our email. All right. Well, so we're quote unquote pulling the attendance sheet at this point. Everybody who's in the class right now is eligible for CE credit. I'm going to give you guys a quick poll. This poll will also be used to justify our giving you credit, meaning I will need you guys to participate in the poll in order to get the CE credit, because this proves that you guys were actually here and not just um, setting up the screen and then walking away. So that poll should be launched. I need everybody to respond to this, and we can go ahead and start up the class. While we're waiting, I appreciate you guys doing this quickly. There we go. So we're going to be starting with matrix first. And I wanted to just run through a couple of the, in my opinion, some of the more useful things that you guys might need to use in matrix. Now, these aren't necessarily, see everybody's responded, thank you. These aren't necessarily things that you guys are going to be using on an everyday basis. As I mentioned before, some of the tools that we're going to be discussing today are things that might be extremely situational, but having access to them could save you an immense amount of time. So uh, before we get started with the big spiel at the beginning, I see that we've got a couple people who are either new or relatively new, but a few veterans in here as well. Everybody has attended the basic matrix class, which is really good news. Not everybody has attended the basic realist class. I'll be honest, realist isn't quite as complicated as matrix, so I'm glad you guys all have a foundation in matrix for sure. I'll run through a couple of the extra context for the tools that we'll be using in realist, just to ensure that you guys are all aware of where we are and why we might be doing what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that. All right. So as technology continues to speed ahead, realtors are either going to be in front of the curve or getting left behind. Now, a lot of the public expects a level of technical expertise from you guys as realtors that's far greater than we've seen before in the past. Now, as these new trends surface in the real estate technology world, like we've recently had coming soon and virtual staging added last year, just to name a few, the last thing that you guys need to be worried about is your proficiency regarding some of these basic tools that you guys use on an everyday basis to run your business. So the Matrix MLS system, as well as the Realist tax system, although obviously not new to any seasoned agent, these contain some advanced tools that if you guys don't know about them or don't use them frequently, can easily be forgotten. That might bog down your daily routine, as some of those easy tasks can become frustrating or cumbersome. So this class is designed to try and teach both new and seasoned agents proficient ways to use some of these advanced tools within the systems that you guys are using every day. So let's get started with kind of a lesser known option within Matrix. We go through in our basic Matrix class some of the things that you can modify about the search functionality. One of the things that we don't really make as big a deal of, but can be very helpful if you guys are trying to arrange maybe a showing tour or something like that, or maybe an agent calls you and says, hey, by the way, we have X, Y, or Z properties that might be of interest to your client. You get into the system, they've got addresses, they don't have the MLS numbers, but you want to still find these listings. There is a house search, an address search bar right up here at the top. Not a lot of people know that there's a more button that allows you to search for up to 10 different addresses at the same time. So if you have a bunch of different properties that somebody's giving you the addresses for rather than the MLS numbers, you can just dump those in there, run your search, and you guys should be able to get in. Oh my, hey, look, we have 2,400 active listings currently. Just as a reminder, if you guys are searching for multiple different property addresses, it might be a good idea to verify whether or not they're all active, because you may end up searching for 7 properties, but one of them is not active and subsequently you can't find it. Additionally, if you guys are searching for properties that have some kind of history, just like you can on the first page where we talk about this in our basic matrix class, you can type in an address here. So just do Riverside. And when I run this, it's going to find all the times that this particular address was listed in our system. This is the same thing that you guys can do whenever you're trying to do the address search here. Just remember that if you guys are trying to find the history for a particular property, uncheck the status option. Anytime you have a section that does not have a qualifier, so for instance, I don't have property subtype checked, so it's actually going to show me everything, whether it's house, condo, townhouse, so on and so forth. If we uncheck the system default, which is active, it's going to show us coming soon, active, pending, withdrawn, closed, etc. Additionally, yeah, that's it for the address search function. Let's talk now about the search defaults. This is actually something that we started discussing a little bit more whenever we ended up having a lot of appraisers and brokers that are trying to do CMAs or BPOs or anything like that in the system, was modifying some system search defaults. So first and foremost, whenever you guys arrive on this screen, the system default, as I mentioned before, is to just check active and nothing else. So we don't have a specific school district or a specific price range or any other details that are built in by default. So let's say that you guys do have a certain area that you are always working within. So for instance, maybe you only ever work in Ada and you don't really work even outside the city too much. So Pontotoc County might be the only place that you're ever going to be looking for comparables. So in this case, what I could do is just go down to the county section, type in Pontotoc. This is going to automatically restrict my search so that I only see, in this case, with no other criteria put in. It went from 2,400 to 73. Now, if I wanted to actually clarify something by just diving into my search, I can put in my price, my bedroom, my bathroom, etc., and not have to worry about finding something that's from way outside of the area that my client is interested in. But in order to save this, any of the extra criteria that you put on, like I only work with houses, I'm only searching in Pontotoc County, I'm only ever looking for foreclosures, I can build all of that in. And then up at the top right corner, we click on this set/clear defaults, and then set this as my selected search criteria as my starting default. So what that means is that if I go back, come back into my search and start doing a quick residential search like usual, it already has house, Pontotoc, and lender owned selected. Now, when we were first talking about this with some of the appraisers, what they really wanted was just to have pending, expired, and closed automatically checked, and then they can make some adjustments to what the time frame is. In this case, this is 0 to 180 days. This is from today, it's a sliding scale all the way back to 100 days in the past. So I always have pretty much the last 6 months of listings available. Again, I can build this in as my selected default. I can leave matrix, come back into it the next day, and it'll still remember that starting search default. Here we go. Now, if you end up not liking this and you want to just set it back to this regular system defaults, same gear, just click on the second button. Here we go. Now, something that we discuss at least momentarily in our full matrix class is the additional fields section down here at the bottom. Now, the additional fields can also be used in that starting search default. So for instance, if I do end up deciding that I want to have HOA amenities built in, and then I also want to have the, let's do appliances. There we go. Maybe let's do some finance options as well. Perfect. So now I've got these 3 or 4 extra fields added in there. The good news is that those fields will always be present whenever we show up at the screen, regardless of whether or not you actually save that as a default. Remember, the default is only saving criteria that you've added. So let's say that you guys are maybe specialized in working with veterans, and you guys always want to have access to properties that are VA finance options. You can check that checkbox here down at the bottom. You select it, come up to the top, save that, and we're good to go. So from now on, anytime I'm getting in here, I'm not seeing any results because I've set this as my default. And the next time I get into my search, I don't have to go down there. I don't have to add in that extra field, and I don't have to check the checkbox for it or select it or whatever. It'll always remember that for me. So it makes it really easy. And again, you guys can cater that towards whatever it is that your business specializes in. So if you guys have something that you guys are always working with, like under a certain price range, whatever the case may be, you can customize that, save it, and you're good to go. Now, we talk about this a little bit in our basic matrix class, but just to reiterate, let's say that we do end up narrowing down our search a little bit, and I've got a few matches that I'm working with. That'll work. All right, sorry about that. So let's say that we've got a few matches and I go to my results. Just like we had the basic defaults whenever we were messing with the criteria, you can also make changes to the layout of this particular page as well. Now, the starting default is just going to be the same layout that we've had since way back in the day, just a gigantic spreadsheet of data in the same layout with MLS number, the status, subtype, so on and so forth. It's pretty much not changed since forever ago. 1992 is when they started doing the digital records. So all of this information has been the same for the past 30 years, but if you guys want to make any adjustments to this, you can simply click and drag to rearrange these. You can also add in new columns or remove columns by just clicking on the gray space next to something. So if I wanted to add in an extra column over here by square footage and put in acres, I can click on the gray space next to square feet, click insert column, scroll down or do my search here to find acres, apply, and now I've got that added in there. Now we can also remove columns. So for instance, if my system search defaults are always to be a house, getting in here and seeing the subtype is going to be redundant. So I don't need this column anymore. I can just hit remove column. And I can save that as my default so that the next time I get in, it doesn't have house and it always has acres. So again, just the same thing that we saw in criteria. Top option saves what I have customized, and the bottom option resets it to the search system defaults. Now, if we do end up going through and making some customization to this and we want to save this for future use, there's a little pen and paper icon over here. This is where we can make some adjustments to it. Once you guys have saved this particular search layout, we can go back to display and we can choose whichever option it is. It's always going to be my as the prefix and then whatever the name was that you gave it. So for instance, if I wanted to do my showing info, I click on that, it's going to have no status because the assumption is all of these are going to be for sale. It's not looking for any properties that are not for sale. We got rid of house because again, I'm always using house. And then I've got my showing contact. Looks like these are mostly showing agent except for this one for showing time. And so that means I need to get in contact with Shelley Beauchamp and get in contact with her at this phone number. Or same thing down here. We've got all of their information and I can just dive right into that information from this particular layout. Now, additionally, whenever you guys end up making any customizations, you can click on that pen and paper again to make some changes to it. If you guys didn't like something about it, you wanted to adjust it, you can save those changes. You can even save a copy. So if you guys do make some changes, but you want to keep the original and make a duplicate that has difference to it, boom, good to go. And then you can also revert any unsaved changes or just get rid of it altogether. So like, for instance, I added one earlier today I didn't like, delete. It gets rid of it. I'll do that with this my single line, delete, and I'm good. Now, the other thing that you can do with any of these customized views is actually take these and print them off as reports. So for instance, if I did end up having this layout, and obviously I'm not going to, just sit here and call this phone number and get in contact with them, I can always print this off for later by just coming down here after I've selected things and doing print. When I go to this showing info option, this gives me a print with everything that I customized on that particular layout. So that way, instead of having to worry about, I have to sit here at my computer screen and call the phone number on the screen, I can print this off, bring it with me, call them whenever I'm somewhere more comfortable, and that's it. So much easier. Um, Now, if you do end up wanting to go through and kind of get rid of a bunch of these, let's say, uh, just to use a practical example, if you're in this webinar, please don't uh, feel like you have to make it known that this was you. But we did have somebody who went through and created a bunch of these custom views. If you guys would like to see all of the custom views without either having to go into a search and look at them from there, or go into a print function and look at them from there, you can go up to the top under the drop down here and do settings. And it's saved under the custom displays. And the custom displays allows us to see all of them at once, so that if there was one that you wanted to get rid of, you can just get rid of it from there. Location, perfect. And you're all set. Oh, and I see we've got a question. JD, I've got a prompt on your screen asking for you to unmute. You can go ahead and ask a question. Oh, I saw your microphone pick up some sound, but I didn't hear anything. Could you repeat your question? Is it sending? I apologize. Bear with me for just a second here, because it looks like it's picking up sound, but I can't hear you. Yeah, it's sending to the right place. I'm so sorry. If you don't mind, if you could type in your question into the Q&A section. For some reason, it's just not picking up your mic, or at least not giving me the sound from it. Sorry about that. That's disappointing. Every once in a while that happens. I'm not sure why. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. All right. Okay, so let's head over now to our hot sheets and our market watch. So we've talked a little bit about customizing the, did this move? I apologize. Actually, we're still not done with our search functions. Yeah, we're still not done with this. Let me get back into a search. Oh, we've already got 2 new listings. All right. So when you guys are on a search, there is another function that actually doesn't get grayed out if you don't have anything selected. So if I wanted to send an email or print something or anything like that, we would actually have to check some checkboxes in order for those options to become available. The only option that actually stays available, no matter what you guys have, whether it's selected or not, is stats. Now, stats comes in 2 different forms. We've got tabular, which is just a really quick overview of all of the properties and their specifications. So what the min, max, average, and median beds are, baths, so on and so forth. I always recommend to people that you guys take a look rather than at the average, because a really low minimum or a really high maximum might end up throwing off the entire thing. Try to focus more on the median, so that any outliers are not going to end up dramatically increasing or decreasing your value. Average, sometimes if you have a bunch of properties combined together and then subsequently one is dramatically higher than the other, that could really throw it off. If you guys want a really good example to give to people whenever you're explaining that, the example I was given was Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan ended up getting his degree at a college for something that he very clearly did not end up doing for the rest of his life. But the average salary for that particular small niche little thing ended up having an average salary that was much, much higher than what was realistic, because of one person who had an exponentially larger salary than everybody else that had that particular criteria. So if you go with the median will effectively wash out any of those really peculiar outliers that are too high or too low. And then you're getting a more accurate vision of what most people might be considering the average. But that side, the other option is charts. So again, tabular effectively gives us what you would be familiar with from a quick CMA. Whereas if we go to the charts option, charts is actually going to allow us to see our basic criteria that we put in. So in case we needed to make any further clarification, ensure that we're not missing anything or narrow down our results a little bit further. But it gives us a bunch of system presets for how we actually want to display the information about those particular properties. So for instance, if we wanted to do the average days on market versus the list price median, this will give us a little bit of extra information. Oh, and actually this is going to be better for closed properties. Let me find, how about list price per square foot ratio? We might need to make some adjustments to this because all of these properties have only been on the market for a very, very, very short period of time. Oh, uh-oh. Can you guys not hear me? I've got one person saying that they have lost audio. Let me double check everything on my side. I'm sorry, Twyla, bear with me for just a moment here. Wow, as if she can hear me. Okay. All right, I've tried to plug it in and check again. I'm still getting audio, or at least it's registering audio from the microphone, but if any of you guys are having trouble hearing me, if you wouldn't mind letting me know either in chat or Q&A, or let me know that you can hear me, I guess I should say. Hopefully she can come back. I'm sorry for the interruption. Okay, so in this case, I'm seeing some issues with some of our system presets. I have a couple that I've created for myself, but let's say that I actually wanted to start from scratch. So I wanted to create a chart that was actually going to be a little bit more targeted, or maybe just within the time frame, or maybe some of the details that I'm actually interested in looking at. And the system search or the system presets aren't providing me what I need. I'm going to come up here to customize. Customize gives me different time frame options. So for instance, I can set this just to the previous year. I can also set this to have specific statistics on here. So for instance, if again, I wanted to get my list price by square foot ratio, and we'll group this up by list price instead. So now when I generate this, it's going to give me, did I group this wrong? Wait, first it was giving me some information, and now it's not giving me any. Let's try a different stat. Is it giving me a combined volume? There we go. There's some more meaningful data. All right. In addition to this, we also do have the advanced options where we can include another statistic. So if you guys wanted to make something really advanced, I think I might have just really shot myself in the foot on this because there's just too few listings. But again, you can do this with a lot of listings or very few. It's just going to depend on what information you're looking for. But in addition to changing which statistics and what time frame, you do also have the option to change how it's grouped and what other information you guys are wanting to include and how that's being displayed. You can also change the style as well, in case you guys wanted to make it something different. And it'll adjust that for you. Of course, again, it's still too few to show me anything, but yeah. And then if you guys wanted to print this off or email it to someone, so if you guys have an investor that needed some information about these listings, you guys can put together that information from here. All right. Next, I also wanted to address now it's time for the Market Watch. So we're going to head back to our homepage. We're going to talk about Market Watch and hot sheets. Now, the Market Watch might be something that you guys are a little bit more familiar with. Market Watch is going to give us, let me reset this. It's going to give us the sum total of all of the listings in our entire system, and all the new listings will be segregated out into a search of its own. If I wanted to see all of those new listings, I can just click on it, and it'll show me anything and everything that's been added within the time frame that I set. Now, the time frame is down here at the bottom, along with cross property, which indicates that it's searching for all residential commercial land and the residential lease options. If I wanted to narrow this down to just residential and I just wanted to do stuff that's been added today, I can clarify that, and suddenly, as you can see, there's nothing on here. If I go instead to be, oh, that's right. Whenever I switched over to residential, I had a previously saved condition. I was like, I know for a fact we've had 2 new listings since we started this class. That can't be true. But this way you guys can narrow down your search results. There's a refresh option that allows you guys to just run that again. And then there's also this customize option, which is actually saved for each category. So for instance, if I come down to commercial, if I had customized this previously, there'd be a customize and also a reset button. Same thing with land or lease. But on this residential one, let's say that whenever you guys click on this, you're seeing properties that are just way outside the area that you're interested in. Like, let's say you guys are working in Bartlesville, you don't care about Union and Broken Arrow. So you can actually customize this to just your local market. So make this Market Watch something relevant by clicking on Customize and then putting in either a property subtype, a school district, or some combination of any of these parts and pieces. And then you can also add in any additional fields as well, which includes, in case you guys are interested in this, like we had somebody previously, you can actually include an office ID, which means that whenever they go through, they can actually see what's happening within their own office. So you put in that MLS ID or some combination of MLS IDs, you can put a comma in to separate all of them out. So that if you guys have an office with multiple, or if you guys have a company that you work for that has multiple offices, you can actually see all of the listings that are happening within that office, which is a request that we had in the past one time, multiple times actually. But if you guys do end up wanting to make any adjustments to this though, hit that customize option. Because again, this could be really cumbersome if you guys aren't narrowing this down to maybe a specific area that you're working with, which just as a reminder does include actually just drawing on the map. So if you guys wanted to do, I only want to work in South Tulsa, Broken Arrow, Bixby at most, we can just draw that on there, save it. And from now on, my Market Watch will only show me the properties within that area so that I'm not accidentally seeing something from Tahlequah when I'm working in Ardmore, for instance. All right. Now, the Market Watch is great, but as you guys might have noticed, the limitation here is that we only get to see one section of the listing changes at a time. So I would only be able to see the new listings with this one. I'd only be able to see the coming soon listings with this one. Now, if you guys would like to get a little bit more holistic view of the entire market, down here towards the bottom under Hot Sheets, there's a similar Customize button. And then we still have the same time frame option here. So we can say, I just want to see what's today. And then I just want to see what's happening in this particular area. Now, in my case, there it is. Yeah. In my case, I've already customized one of these hot sheets. Let me actually make that adjustment now because this should not have that on there. There we go. Okay. So whenever I click on today, it's going to show me all of the properties that have had any kinds of changes in it. So I see all the new listings, and then by the time I make it to coming soon, back on market. So this is going to be a little bit better for whenever you guys need to find everything that's going on in a specific area, which includes all the kinds of change types that you might be interested in. So in this case, back on market, price decreases, price increases, and so on. So let's actually find out how to customize that. When I go into the customize for this one, instead of bringing me directly into a customized page where we had the search criteria that we could add to it, instead it shows me each of the individual each of the individual hot sheets. Now, by default, you should have one that's residential, commercial, land, lease, and cross property, and all of those should be the entire MLS, which means that if I click on residential, it shows me everything that's had any changes in our system, whether it's at the top corner of the state, the bottom corner of the state, doesn't matter. If it's in our system, it's going to be displayed there. If that's not what you want, you can always click on edit criteria, but let's actually click on add. So we're starting with something that's just brand spanking new. And I'm actually going to do this one for, let's do Durant. Why not? I like where those lakes are down there. So we've got Durant. And just like any of these system defaults, which you can always adjust for yourself, there's that edit criteria button. When you create a new one, it's going to start off with just nothing in there. It doesn't care that you wrote down Durant. It doesn't think that that's a specific criteria. We have to edit the criteria in order to make that adjustment. So when we get in here, I'm going to say I want anything that's a new listing. I'm going to hold down the control key, or if you guys are on a Mac, it'll be the command key, and then select another couple items. Do active. I think that should be good. So this way I'm focused, maybe I'm only working with buyers. So I wanted to see all the new listings coming soon, back on market, the price it decreases, and anything that might have come back to active some other way. So like if it came out of contingent, but it's still technically active. So we've got all of those clarified so that that way I'm not seeing any price increases or pending or closed or anything else that I don't have of it, like it's just not interesting to my clients. And I come over here to city, clarify the city, or I could even do a map search and just clarify it even further, a certain part of the city. I'm going to clarify my subtype. That's it. I usually don't recommend to people that they start clarifying the price or the bedroom count, bathroom count. Those kinds of things are nuance that you would want to add to a search for a client rather than accidentally having like a specific prescribed price and then not finding things that may be of interest to one client, even though it might not be beneficial to another. You can still use this market watch, or excuse me, this hot sheet to construct effectively a custom search, but saved searches are a lot more utilitarian and you could save those to a client, whereas this hot sheet really is just for you. So just try and conceptualize this as a more advanced market watch for yourself. So I'm going to save this. And when I go back to my home page, this time when I click on residential, again, remember this one's just a system default. I see 159. If I switch this over to Durant, I'm going to see a whole lot of nothing. So it doesn't look like there's been any major changes in any of the categories that I chose for my hot sheet. But let's actually change my time frame to the last week. If I click on the residential here, oh, yeah, that's a lot of changes. If I go to my changes in Durant for the last 7 days, here's our new listings. Here's a back on market that went from withdrawn to active. And then here's a couple that ended up having some, whoa, that's a pretty hefty decrease. Maybe not percentage wise, but somebody's going to get a deal. Anyway, so Market Watch, hot sheets, very simple, very easy. But if you guys end up needing to get a little bit more clarification to these, or maybe you wanted a hot sheet that was just going to be my office. So I could just say office listings, save, edit criteria, come down to the bottom here, and you just put in your list office ID under the additional field for it. So pretty simple. I think that should be it. There's one other thing that I would suggest that you guys get familiar with, and that's actually going to be under My Listings. So under My Listings, this is where you guys can see all of the listings that you guys have ever had, but it's going to be broken down into different categories according to this drop down up here at the top. Now, this is where you guys can find any of the incomplete listings that you guys maybe still need to finish off. It's really easy to jump into those. You just check the checkbox and click on Edit, and it brings you right to where you left off. So I can go back into residential, finish filling out all of my details, and so on. We also have the option when you guys are on that My Listings page to check out any of the pending listings. So for instance, if you guys get a notice in your email or on the homepage of Matrix telling you that you have an ACD warning or the anticipated closing date warning, you can quickly find all of those pending listings. You can also see any of your coming soon listings so that if they're still in some kind of coming soon status, but they're going to change tomorrow, you can find them. But mostly I wanted to show you guys this hit counters. Now my hit counters is only going to be able to keep track of what's happening within Matrix and within the one home system. So where the clients are actually viewing the portal and the listings that you've sent them. But it's important to recognize that this is still a pretty good amount of information and a lot more targeted than what you might have from somebody that's, let's say, perusing Zillow. Like my wife loves to just hang out on Zillow and take a look at properties. She's like, take a look at this. And I'm like, I look at houses for a living. I don't know that I have the capacity to keep staring at these, but that kind of idle scrolling through things won't be as useful as finding out whether an agent or a client that actually has been directed by an agent to look at one home has been viewing your properties. So when you get into my hit counters, what you're seeing here is I've got an MLS number. This is my only active listing. It's fake. I mean, if you guys want to sell it, I'm down to take the cooperating side of things, but it's not going to work. This is a fake house. So we've got 16 client portals. So this is somehow still, even though I tried to put it out in the middle of nowhere, it still made its way onto 16 client portals. Not a single client has viewed it. Thank God. I don't know if you guys have seen our fake listings, but they are very fake. Very, very fake. Please, please try to avoid sending some of these to people. But what this means is that if somebody does actually get this in their portal and they view it, I can see that number. Same thing goes if somebody favorites it, if somebody saves it as a possibility, how many auto emails have actually ended up sending this out, as well as how many times anybody's seen it in the last 14 days, if an agent ended up trying to publish this information by printing it off, which in this case, I'm almost 100% positive I know exactly who did this because somebody reported this listing. We only make it active for the webinars typically, but I think I left it active for a whole month by accident one time, and somebody reported it, which is fine. That's good. If you guys find problems in our system, please don't hesitate to let us know. We do have a couple agents that have actually gone through on an auto email and said, please don't send this, again, because it's a test listing. That's good. And then we also see how many times agents have pulled this information up with their IDX feed and how many times agents themselves have actually clicked on my listing and opened it up to view it. Now, you'll notice that a couple of these actually do have buttons where we can see, how many times people have viewed it. And in this case, oops, is it? Oh, that's why I had it unchecked from last time I was in here. There we go. So the show agent views here, showing how many times it gets viewed on a past 4 weeks and on a weekly basis, daily basis almost. Yeah. So we can see how frequently people are looking at it and so on. So fairly simple, but it's a good way to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of your listings and find out if they're being advertised well enough or if people are interested in it, whatever the case may be. Maybe you need to change the primary photo to be a better picture of the front of the house or get an aerial shot of the front of the house. Maybe that'll encourage people to kind of investigate it further, whatever the case may be. All right. Well, the last 15 minutes here, we're going to be spending on Realist. Before we end up transitioning over, though, I did actually want to ensure that if anybody had any questions about Matrix, I don't mind cutting into our Realist time because, as I mentioned at the beginning of class, there's not quite as much to do in Realist as there is in Matrix. Matrix is very robust. All right, let's go ahead and move over to Realist now. So Realist, when you guys first get signed into it, it's actually going to start you off on a page that has just the county that you guys are working in. As a reminder, you guys can click in here and you have a limit of adding 8 counties. This prevents you from accidentally seeing every single property that happens to match even the most minute details throughout an entire state. They try to make sure that you're only looking at up to 8 counties at a time. If we do end up adding multiple counties, just as a reminder, let me find something that's at least close to Rogers. Oh, and Creek is also, there we go. Whenever you guys are adding in the counties, just a reminder, this recording date is indicating to you when it is that we last got fresh data from that county assessor's office. So if there's something that you guys were expecting to show some details or some changes or whatever the case may be, double check the recording date. You can verify that maybe it just hasn't been enough time since they last made that change. And in fact, if you're on the main screen and you're curious about that, you have multiple counties selected, if you hold your cursor over it, it'll show you all the details. So Creek was last updated December 20th, Rogers 28, so on. But the county is going to be appearing above our quick search and my search. And Realist always starts us off on a quick search. This is actually a system-wide default, which means that if you guys move to a completely different state, but they still happen to use Realist, this quick search is going to be identical. Now, we don't care about the quick search so much as the My Search section. This is where you guys have full options to make customization. There's qualifiers you can add. There's additional attributes that you can search by. This is where you guys are going to want to search by. Now, when you first land on the regular My Search page, it's going to start us off with the saved searches up here at the top. We have a couple system defaults that are ours. We customized these and made them the ones that you guys might like. It starts off with general query, and then we also have one that's a little bit more targeted towards those foreclosures, which is the foreclosure query. Now, when you get into these, it already has a bunch of the basic attributes saved, the same way that we saw when we were in Matrix and we go into the quick search. If we do end up deciding to do like a create your own search in the version of Matrix, notice how it starts us off with no defaults. And then we have to add in any of the additional fields that we want, including basic stuff like the status. So if I were to go to commercial, create your own, it's just a blank page. That's not really ideal. And the same thing goes with Realist. When you guys first get into Realist, there's these system search defaults, but let's say that you guys wanted to start with something that was just completely new. You can go in here and do create new search, but you notice how it starts us off with nothing selected. And then if you do end up adding anything, you have to change where it's located. So if there was something else that you wanted to add as well, you'd have to like move this up and down to get it in the right position. Let me show you guys a really handy trick for this. I'm going to go to the general query. This is just, again, the system default. Zoom it out. If this is too small for anybody, please just let me know. This is actually the regular default, which looks great unless you guys are on a small screen. I'll zoom it in just a little bit there. So when we get in here and we do the general query includes some of the things that you guys might always need to use. like owner name, house, street suffix, what subdivision it's in, city, zip code. But it also includes some things that you guys might not use that often. Like maybe you guys aren't searching by owner name that often because who knows how somebody spells their name. Sometimes you guys might be looking for vacant land and you don't have an address to work with, but you do have township range and section down here at the bottom. But if you're working with properties that have a building on it, it's got an address, searching by that's probably going to be better. But up here at the top, we've got a customized search button. Now again, this is a system default, which means that I can't make any changes to the general query. But let's say that I wanted to add something that might be useful, like the tax ID. If I want to search by tax ID, I just check the checkbox for it. It's no longer the general query up at the top. I've created a brand new search, but instead of starting off with a completely blank slate, having to re-add things that I already knew that I wanted, it already has everything on there that I wanted, and I can just adjust where things are. So I can remove my township range and section if I'm ever working with vacant land or new construction. I can move my tax ID up here to the top, right above my owner name. If I wanted to add in maybe the suffix, or not the suffix, pre-directional and post-directional, I can go to the geography. I can do pre-direction, post-direction, and then make sure that those are added into the correct position. So after the house number, after the street name, or after the suffix, depending on which county you happen to live in. And then now I can give this a name. So instead of working with that general query and then having a duplicate one that's not got the lock on it, I don't know why some systems do that, but instead what I can do is just give this a name, Mike's Mix. There we go, and save. What that does is it saves my search, and then I hit apply to allow me to actually use this search function now. So now when I'm going through here, I can actually put in a house number with the pre-direction, the street name, the street suffix, the post-direction. I can clarify what subdivision it's in, city, et cetera, et cetera. Ooh, Twyla asked a question. Is there a way to access deed restrictions, covenants for a specific subdivision through Realist? No, but coincidentally, we have actually asked for them to have more document information. Because right now, interestingly enough, the system actually does show us whenever there is a document attached to a specific sale. Let me see if I can luck out, find something that actually has one. It might have been too long ago. Let's see. Oh, yes, it does. Okay. So we've got a bunch of these document numbers. So Realist for now does not have the capability of actually accessing those documents. I know that there's another system whose name eludes me at the moment. They use it down in Durant. That was my first exposure to it. That actually did have all sorts of extra documentation that you could actually jump into to, verify something or find out what's happening with a specific property. But for whatever reason, Realist still hasn't gotten on board with that. That, or if I'm being honest, the big complaint that I heard with the other system that actually had deeds and plats and covenants, and, I mean, just a huge myriad of other different options, was that it was really dependent on the county. I know that the assessor's offices throughout the entire state are all moving to a new piece of software, though. So I'm hoping that having that kind of continuity between counties is actually going to help in some ways, as long as everybody's still putting in data correctly. Like, what is it? Osage County, for instance. Osage County puts in the number of buildings on a property in the place where it's acres. So they'll still have an accurate number for the lot square footage, but then the acre count will literally be how many buildings are on the property. So it's always a whole number, which was the first indication there was something radically wrong with the system, because every property in the entire county had a whole number for acreage, which would be pretty cool, but no, that's not how it works. So And actually, that's just a random aside. Uh, but if you guys do end up noticing some of those like weird idiosyncrasies, we have a pretty good relationship with our liaison with Realist. If you find stuff like that, anything that's causing you guys issues with it. So for instance, if you guys come across something like with Osage, and there was a couple other counties that do that exact same thing, where they've been using a field wrong intentionally, and everybody in the county knows it, but not everybody outside of it knows that. So then there's quote unquote bad data being fed in. If you guys find things like that, please let us know. I know that there's not always something that we can do about how the county's keeping their records, but there is something that we can do about how we process that information. So anyway, yeah, that's a good question. I'm hoping that we will eventually have a lot better documents and some of access to some of the other information. It's usually just a matter of having that access consistent so that each county is providing us the same details. And in fact, I should show you guys that's another thing to discuss that's advanced. Whenever you guys get into a specific report, up here at the customize view option, there's a choice between fixed and dynamic. I know we mentioned this in the basic realist class, but just for those of you guys who haven't seen that yet, if you switch this over to a fixed view, what it's going to do is show all available attributes. Now, what that means is that instead of it just paring everything down to the attributes that only have values, so let me highlight that real quick. So like, let's take a look at our characteristics. You notice how when we're looking at characteristics, every single field that it shows right here has at least some piece of information. So that means that number of buildings, the building type, foundation, all of those are included on this particular report because they have a piece of information in there. If I come up to the top and switch this over to a fixed view, you can see all of the fields that Realist has access to, regardless of whether or not this particular property or this particular county even is actually keeping track of that information. So for instance, land use according to state, well, Tulsa County might not be keeping track of that, or it might not have applied it to this particular address, and subsequently this field was empty. So when I switched it over to the fixed view, it shows that field even though there's no details in there. Now, if you guys do end up liking this view, which I've actually had a lot of questions about this because people will get in here and be like, I know for a fact that most of the property, like that, I had a guy whose specialty, or quote unquote specialty, was working with historic properties. He was extremely knowledgeable on all that, like what styles there were and all this cool stuff. It was really interesting to hear. Also seemed to have a lot of Muskogee memorized. He was very familiar with all the historical codes and everything, but getting into a property and not seeing that was kind of a shock because that's what he worked with. So if you guys would like, you can use that fixed view, but I do think that the dynamic view is a little bit more practical because again, it's just going to omit anything that's not filled in. So that if you get in here and there is no historical preservation code or district or whatever, it's just not there. So you don't have to worry about it. Out of sight, out of mind, keeps you focused on the things that are going to be important to your transaction. But let's go back a step. Now, another thing that you guys have access to, besides obviously changing the search, you do have a split map or list view. I typically recommend people to, if you're going to be doing the map search, switch it over to the map view. And then once you guys actually have your results, then you can switch over to list view. There are two different ways for you guys to display the list. You have either a list view, which actually is just the generic spreadsheet style layout. You also have a card view. Let me get some results on this screen so we can take a look at this. I'm going to put in a is between. We'll do 1500 to 1600. I'm going to do South Peoria. This is part of the reason why I always add in the pre-direction. Go. 6 matches. Perfect. So when I see my list view in the card layout, It shows just a few pieces of information, and there's really not much you can customize about this. Notice there's 3 out of 3 attributes. Maybe I don't want the total assessed value. Maybe I just want the other owner's name. There we go. Apply that, and it just changes the layout down here. But if you guys switch over to the table view, you can make adjustments to it the same way that we did in Matrix. And the customize, where we do show hide, brings us back to the same place that we saw for attributes, the same exact list, and we can add up to 30 attributes at the same time. But that's about it. It's 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and end class here. For those of you guys who were able to join us on time today, I appreciate it. You guys should be eligible for CE credit. I do believe we had somebody, one person that joined after that, but I appreciate you guys joining us, regardless of whether or not you're here for credit. Hopefully you guys were able to get something out of this. I'm going to leave the session open for a little while. If you guys have any additional questions, I'd love to field those. But if you guys want to wait or maybe digest this information and give us a call after the fact, I'm going to put our contact information up on the screen, and hopefully I will see you guys in the future. Please be safe. Practice social distancing. Keep your mask on whenever you're around other people. Keep yourself safe. Keep your family safe. And hopefully we'll see you guys in a future class. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate that. I think this webinar Wednesdays thing is a really beneficial thing, if only just for me, just because it's getting a little tiresome having to be on 3 or 4 days a week to teach. I'm glad to hear it. Thanks, JD. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close up shop. Again, if you guys have any questions, just reach out to us. See you soon.